Note the disclaimer.
Reading.
According to all known laws of aviation.
Narration of the reading. Narrating?
Oh boy, we're in for a long one, folks.
Yellow, black, yellow, black. Ooh, black and yellow. Yeah, let's shake it up a little.
This is the movie's first joke, and it's so lame you wonder how the rest of the movie ever got made in the first place.
Sure, but who can honestly say a CinemaSins joke is any better? Besides, the gag here is that they only wear black and yellow, and in Barry's case, it's almost always a sweater, with only a couple of exceptions.
Another indication of this movie's terrible humor inside of 2 minutes. Honey used as hair gel, gargle, and deodorant. Bees! Honey! Laugh, damn you!
Honey is a precious resource to these bees, and they use it for everything. It's like us and water. We drink it to sustain our lives. We use it to clean various items, including ourselves. We swim in it, and it can be used as an ingredient in cooking. In bee world, honey is pretty similar.
And a perfect report card. All bees.
Get ready for an hour and a half of bee puns, and that's about it.
So this fool sat down to watch a DreamWorks film called Bee Movie and is upset about the premise. Everything is going to revolve around bees, including the jokes.
Stop flying in the house!
Why the hell would bees have cars? More importantly, how the hell would bees have cars? Is this just an animated version of all the things Jerry Seinfeld likes? Like cars, sneakers, and dating women that are way out of his league? It is? Oh.
Sinning an actor for having interests. Also, the reason they have cars is explained by this line of dialogue later in the movie.
How come you don't fly everywhere?
It's exhausting. Why don't you run everywhere? Isn't that faster?
It's also possible that many bee generations have seen what humans do and did something similar. But it's a really dumb question to ask since the movie is giving you rules about its world, and here you are again claiming it's bullshit and expecting everyone to take your word for it.
Comedians in cars getting paychecks.
Arbitrary TV reference.
Also, shouldn't there be more concern over the frisbee hitting the hive? That must have been like a giant earthquake.
Missed your opportunity to say hivequake there, bud. But beyond that, it is of the most concern, since aside from the pizzeria ad, it's practically taking up over half the front page.
These guys park the car and then illustrate why they shouldn't need a car by flying out of the car.
Again, they can't fly absolutely everywhere because it's exhausting.
Are we gonna pick our job today?
I heard it's just orientation.
How the hell do these assholes not know what's coming? Were they seriously not informed that they were going to do bee shit? What was the point of school then?
They only get 9 days of school, which seems to encompass everything from grades K through 12, plus college. Since bees generally don't live long, they do have at least several instances of trying to experience life until working, and for them the process is far quicker than it would be in the real world.
That girl was hot. She's my cousin. Yes, we're all cousins.
Casual reference to the rampant incest in this hive is extremely casual.
Yep, Alabama would be proud.
The same job for the rest of your life? I didn't know that.
How could you not have known that? This is something that would have been taught since birth, right?
You're double dipping again. But since you're confused, it's a likelihood that much like real life, Barry wouldn't have paid too much attention in school, since he mentions taking a bit of time off to hitchhike around the hive, meaning he might have missed some of that vital behavior.
Wait, they literally just said,
Everybody knows you sting someone, you die.
so how was this asshole able to off 7 other people, then himself?
Well, they didn't mention what kind of bee it was, since honeybees have barbed stingers while other bee species don't. So it's possible they could be talking about a bumblebee, but if not, then this is another instance of you questioning cartoon logic.
Hey, those are pollen jocks.
Man, this movie sure is selective on what the main characters do and don't know. So they know who the pollen jocks are, but nothing else about how honey is made.
Again, Barry took some time out of his schooling to explore the further reaches of the hive, so he might not be as privy to the knowledge as Ferris Bueller is.
Aren't they our cousins too?
Distant.
Alabama.
At least you didn't try to bust out the Lynyrd Skynyrd.
We're going 0900 at J-Gate. What do you think, Buzzy boy?
Wait, so anyone can become a pollen jock at a moment's notice? I know the Flyboys are f***ing with Barry here, but they're also being serious about him leaving the hive. Is this a breach of protocol? Who the f*** knows anything about the rules here?
Not necessarily, as they all have wings, and Barry was talking up a big game. The only reason it would be a protocol breach is if it were actually anything like an F-15 fighter jet, and Barry just leapt in there without any prior training. Also, Jeremy yells at the screen cliche.
I thought they were supposed to pick their occupations that day, right? But it seems like right after the corporate lady made that announcement, everyone went their separate ways. Jesus, I don't think this movie even stopped to watch itself.
Because, like Adam said, it was only orientation. The job hunt began the next day, so clearly you're the one not paying attention here.
Whenever a bee dies, that's an opening. See that? He's dead. Dead. Another dead one.
This goes on for some time.
Irony.
What happened to you?
Bee antenna are phones, and they actually make a ringing noise when you get a call.
Well, yes, that is accurate. Wait, is that it? He didn't say something was wrong with the film. He just stated something they've established in their world. I'm amazed you didn't cover this in the opening scene.
Wind. Check. Antenna. Check.
Nectar pack. Check. Wing. Check.
Stinger. Check.
But these guys are all checking different things, and are only checking themselves, not the entire fleet. So this is some really wasteful use of radio waves.
I think the joke is that they're all checking these items off and we're only hearing one bee at a time because a massive mix of voices might be too much. Similar to how in movies like Star Wars and Top Gun, several cockpits will be shown in the movie with each pilot checking things off one by one. The only difference is the bees are the planes.
Whoa! I'm out! I can't believe I'm out!
Why is this such a big deal? At the beginning of the movie, Adam and Barry were talking about their friend that was killed by a squirrel, so apparently school-age bees are able to leave the hive. But this is Barry's first time?
Oh, you just answered yourself, Jer. This is Barry's first time out of the hive, and rarely do most teenage or adolescent bees get the opportunity. As for Frankie, he was most likely finished with college or just starting it, and took a gap year like Barry did, only his trip was much more deadly.
Also, this shot suggests that the bees immediately ascend to the altitude of a New York City skyscraper, which is some serious bee.
Sure, it may be a load of crap to you, but let me just say this right now. It's an animated film about sentient bees that can talk to humans and organize a trial. This isn't our reality.
We have Rose's visual.
So was this the 6-mile journey that the Pollen jocks were talking about yesterday? They didn't even leave the fucking park.
This stop was probably closer because they usually look towards roses, daisies, and hyacinths anyway. They also say Quadrant 9 has the sunflower patch, which might be for a different group, and the leader also talked about roses.
The movie completely reinvents how bees pollinate flowers, for the sake of, I guess, maybe toy sales? I'm not sure why the guns had to be part of the equation, to be honest.
Again, this isn't our reality.
Also, sure, the firing of suck guns in order to extract pollen from flowers is apparently extremely typical behavior, and is completely unnoticed by humans.
Narration. Which is ironic since you send the movie right at the start for narration. Also, this particular part of the machine is to extract nectar, not pollen. There's two different modes to it, and when it's full of nectar like this, they have to do the pollination by hand.
Dude seriously reaches up to grab the frisbee that's surrounded by a swarm of fucking bees. That's commitment.
Sure, it's bold, but I'm fairly certain he didn't even notice the bees above it. Hell, he didn't even end up grasping one. Of course, if he were to feel their stingers, he probably would have ended up finding out.
This is the coolest. What is it?
I don't know, but I'm loving this color.
This scene not only presupposes that experienced pollen jocks mistake tennis balls for flowers, but also that they've never seen these fuckers in Central Park.
One of the jocks said he was picking up bright yellow, assuming it to be a daisy, but as soon as they realised they were moving, took a closer look, and had no idea what they were. As for never seeing them in Central Park, the tennis balls probably don't go that far out of the tennis court anyway, and the jocks rarely even touch the ground in this park.
No lie, the movie is going to hinge on the first day out of the hive guy getting stuck on a tennis ball and not getting smashed by any of the ensuing tennis.
Okay. Wait, what was supposed to be the sin here?
Me, I'm sick of counting how many times a fucking bee would be killed over the last 2 minutes alone, so I'm just gonna guess it would be 32 and assign the movie that many fucking sins.
Adding sins for no good reason. No lie. Even if that isn't in their mission statement, that is their MO. Adding sins for no good reason.
Can't fly in rain. Can't fly in rain.
Not only does he believe this wives' tale bull, but he's also literally flying in the rain while chanting this mantra.
Convenient that you didn't include the part where raindrops land directly on his wings when you say that. I bet you did that just because you know it would discredit your sin. But since we're here, I'm just going to point out that this isn't an old wives' tale because he gets hit by 2 droplets later, which affects his ability to fly, causing him to crash land in Vanessa's apartment.
Hey, check out my new resume. I made it into a fold-out brochure.
What the hell? Vanessa and Ken were playing tennis less than 2 movie minutes ago, and all we've seen is Barry get tossed into a car and fly into a window. But they had time to finish the game, pack up, and get all the way home?
Well, they probably knew that the rain was coming, so they had to pack up and leave. And my bet is that even if it was 2 movie minutes ago, it still would have taken about 9 to 10 minutes to get their stuff, catch a taxi, and head back to the apartment. They just don't show it because it isn't as important as what Barry had to go through, and even if they did, Vanessa and Ken hadn't even properly been introduced yet, and you'd probably seen it for padding the runtime.
This time!
Barry enacts exactly how I feel watching this movie.
How do we know you're not just doing that to yourself?
Jesus, Vanessa was able to change clothes and come up with this spread in less than 30 seconds. Goddamn time-traveling Zellwegers covering up their goddamn tracks.
Again, cut down for time. It probably would have taken longer to change, but my bet is that the chips and guac were probably already pre-prepared before tennis. But of course, they don't show that because, like I said earlier, they don't want the movie taking too long.
It's at this point you start realizing Vanessa might actually want to f*** this bee.
Wrong. She's only doing this because she cares about bees due to the work they do for the flowers, both in her home and in her shop. And even if that were the case, that would not be possible at all. And I get it, this is one of the weirdest movies in DreamWorks' roster, and one of the most bizarre in Jerry Seinfeld's career, but if you're making sins like this that make it out to be way worse than it is, then you're probably more depraved than I realised.
I guess I've seen more egregious product placement, but definitely not this cheesy.
I've seen worse though, and they do bring up Cinnabon later.
Coffee?
I hate to impose.
Don't be ridiculous.
Actually, I would love a cup.
Setting aside the many impracticalities of this interspecies meet cute, how the would Barry drink a cup of f***ing coffee? Or know what coffee is, but not like Windows?
Barry doesn't know what windows are, because he and the other bees don't have them in their hive. It's mostly open air due to them all flying around the place half the time. And I'm imagining that with their work schedules, they'd have to make it through the day at least with a cup of joe, just like the rest of us. Probably in smaller doses than us, though, as Barry points out later.
How'd you get back?
Poodle.
But the hive was within sight of Bridget Jones' apartment, right? Barry could have flown home in a matter of seconds.
This is the 3rd time I have to mention this. Bees cannot fly long distances. They get exhausted easily. So no, it wouldn't have taken seconds for Barry to get back to the hive from Vanessa's apartment, unless he was using a warp drive, which, despite this being an animated movie, does not exist there.
Do you know what a Cinnabon is?
Do you? Jesus, Barry was out of the hive for an afternoon, but apparently is super goddamn knowledgeable about human
I did tell you they were going to bring up Cinnabons, Jeremy. But in this instance, despite only being out there from 9 AM to near twilight, he had a fair bit to experience and learn about the human world, as opposed to everything he heard about in BTV networks like NBC, which mostly talked about the humans as murderous savages.
Who can deny the heart that is yearning?
I can. I will gladly volunteer to deny said yearning bee heart. You're yearning for a human. This movie is dumber than stupid.
Wow, so we're now calling a movie stupid just because you refuse to follow it. You really are an extraordinary specimen, Jeremy, and I don't mean that as a compliment.
There he is. He's in the pool.
Wait, I thought honey was this super precious commodity, so why did the Bensons fill an entire f***ing swimming pool with it?
Like I said earlier, it's most similar to water, which means yes, you can fill a swimming pool with it. Drink it, bathe in it, just about everything you could do with water.
I realize she kind of weirded out yesterday when they first spoke, but isn't she just a little too okay with talking to her new bee friend on day 2? It went from weird to normal in less than 18 hours.
Well, yes, but that's because they had a conversation over coffee that lasted for the rest of the afternoon and into the evening, since the New York City skyline was already at sunset when Barry said his goodbyes. Not to mention, they also held hands for a little bit, and while that may appear strange to us, this, once again, is not our reality. I will, however, commend you for not making a "this scene does not include a lap dance" scene during Barry's dream, because that would have gone a totally weird direction from then on out.
Bees don't know about this. This is stealing.
How in the world would bees not know about this? Maybe your hive doesn't know, but bees talk to other bees, right? None of them have ever seen a human harvesting their honey?
This may not be as big of news in the bee world until Barry discovers it. And besides, it's coming from the wooden fake hives seen on the honey farms, as opposed to the wild nests like Barry's.
He paints his yellow stripes black, but leaves his yellow face and yellow sweater alone, because he is a bee and has no concept of subterfuge. And this is a stupid movie.
I think the goal here was for Barry to look tough, to try and intimidate the supply worker that harassed him earlier with a rolled-up magazine, instead of use some form of deceit.
FYI, a bee is fencing with his stinger against a human using a thumbtack.
Oh, for the love of... Can you stop narrating the movie for 5 minutes and get on with the actual sins? My god, how did these guys get famous?
Why does everything have to be so doggone clean? Open your eyes! Stick your head out the window!
Movie saw Mulan and then called Chris Rock and said, "Hey, can we hire you to do, like, a B-movie version of that voice?"
Hold on, I'm lost. Is the sin here supposed to be that Chris Rock is copying Eddie Murphy in Mulan? Or is it that Chris Rock is a lesser version of Eddie Murphy? Or did you simply forget that this is Chris Rock's style and we heard it previously before in Madagascar? Or are you just making another arbitrary movie reference? I'm just so confused here that I'm probably just going to add 12 sins for this and move on.
He's got a brain the size of a pinhead! They are pinheads!
I guess in order to be a successful beekeeper, one must have a consuming hatred of bees.
I think these guys are just assholes. Because generally beekeepers care about the well-being of their bees. Much like how a farmer will care for their cows, chickens and pigs until the inevitable happens.
This is your queen? That's a man in woman's clothes. That's a drag queen.
Instead of pointing out the dated humor of a movie from way back in 2007, I'd like to submit the question of how a fucking bee knows what a drag queen is.
Crikey! This is a turnaround. Especially when Birdman pointed out this in your Lion King video.
Does Simba one day get pulled over for having a transvestite hooker in his car?
Oof, talk about a dated video. I'm not one of them cancel culture types, but even I wouldn't have touched that one in 2015.
So that already sounds mighty hypocritical of you. Or would be if you actually addressed it properly. Normally it would be 10 sins for an inappropriate comment cliche, and I'm not one of those cancel culture types. But my lord, that was a boundary overstep. So let's just make it 75. As for how would Barry know what a drag queen is, my bet is, again, bees saw what humans were doing and adopted some of their behaviours, which might include, well, drag performances. Also in that photo, Barry could clearly tell since the queen had a buzz cut and some form of stubble, so it would be easy for him to figure it out.
Wait, where the hell did Barry get a fucking spy camera? He didn't go back to his hive after discovering the honey in the grocery store, so that means he just had it on him while on his date with Vanessa, which brings up some even more disturbing questions.
Okay, let's just clear this up right away. Even if Barry would have liked this, Barry and Vanessa are not dating. She's still with Ken at this point, and as for why he had the camera, my bet is he just had it around for any form of nature documentation or sightseeing. They just don't bring it up in the movie because it isn't important information as to why he had the camera. You're just opening up a can of worms about why he had it here and are making a nonsensical sin out of it just for the guise of weirding out your audience.
Dated a cricket once in San Antonio. Man, those crazy legs kept me up all night.
The movie will simply not miss a chance to throw in a reference to some creepy, crawly, interspecies insect intercourse.
But you were sinning them earlier for making incest jokes about the bees in the hive and questioning the logistics of a human and bee pollinating. So clearly you're the only one that this fact is bugging.
Larry, bees have never been afraid to change the world. I mean, what about Bee Columbus? Bee Gandhi? Bejesus.
I'm with you on the Columbus one, Jezza. But the rest, no. Just no. Learn how to laugh properly at moments like this and come back to me.
Quiet, please. Actual work going on here.
Is that same bee?
Wait, so the whole bees can talk is just accepted now? And even though it's the first rule of beedom not to talk to humans, Barry faced 0 repercussions for breaking it?
Well, not 0. Adam practically freaked out when Barry told him, then ratted that factoid out to Barry's parents.
How did you get mixed up in all this?
Because he's been talking to humans.
What?
Talking to humans? He has a human girlfriend.
Oh, Barry.
And they make out!
Make out? Barry?
We do not.
And it's not entirely accepted, as Vanessa is more at ease with it. Various people who walked past during Vanessa's walk to the supermarket weren't listening in. The store clerk looked shocked. And Ken later in this scene asks, why does he talk again? And the only ones who have come to expect it now end up being the judge, jury, and defendants of the honey trial.
I'm helping him sue the human race.
Well, you own a flower shop, so I'm guessing you're a huge help.
Well, she says later that bees have good qualities. I think that's mostly florist talk for they keep her flowers pollinated, and she in return doesn't spray them with something like Raid or Morphine.
You know, Barry, this lawsuit's a pretty big deal.
That's why I'm mailing it at night after preparing it myself and not even once consulting a lawyer.
Barry is the one taking the honey industry to trial here, and he's representing himself in the defense counsel as well as all the other honeybees. Meanwhile, the plaintiff, who is able to do the same thing, may want some form of representation, which they get in the form of Montgomery.
Why is there a jury? Shouldn't this just be a preliminary hearing? How did the jury even get selected if this is the first day of the trial?
My guess is it took a few days for this trial to get off the ground, and the selection process for jurors can also take time due to challenges from the prosecution and the defense. Other factors like bias or inflexible appointments, or even a reselection due to illness. However, a jury wouldn't necessarily be needed since this is a civil suit. However, some can still be required depending on circumstances.
The Honorable Judge Bumbleton presiding.
Judge Bumbleton? This movie's not happy giving me the finger. It wants to also shove that finger up my butthole.
Gross.
Barry B. Benson versus the honey industry.
You can sue a whole industry?
Yes, especially if it's due to breach of contract, negligence, product liability, and other heinous acts, including theft and illegal profit like Barry is arguing here. I mean, hell, Stella Liebeck successfully sued McDonald's for damages from an insanely hot coffee when they left her with literally no other option but to do so. More information about the case is in the description below.
Your opening statement, please.
This movie is basically the non-holiday Miracle on 34th Street for bees. That was actually probably the whole pitch, but since it was coming from Jerry Seinfeld, the studio execs didn't pay much attention to the words and just threw cash at him.
Is this reference only because of the fact that a trial occurs? If so, that's a bit of a weasel call. Also, yet another box office sin, just after the robots video I covered.
Mr. Klaus Vanderhayden of Honey Farm.
Barry told us earlier that flying is exhausting, but he's hovering during this examination instead of standing. Can this movie ever follow its own logic?
Hold it right there! Now you're admitting that Barry can't fly around everywhere, but are still asking why he's hovering as if he forgot this issue? Well, since he can't answer that one, I will for him. He's hovering, so he's not using as many muscles as he would properly flying. And he's doing it so he can actually be heard by the witnesses.
You mean like this?
Even in a fictitious world where bees are allowed to sue humans for taking their honey, I refuse to concede that the judge would allow a live fucking bear into the courtroom.
Oh, for the love of... This isn't our reality! And here I thought you were going to sin the Easter egg of Vincent from Over the Hedge being in this movie. And no, I'm not going to cover the rest of this sin, because it's just him bad-mouthing the movie again.
Have you ever been stung, Mr. Sting?
A fucking Sting cameo? Because his name is Sting? And this is a movie about bees? How did Jerry Seinfeld have any credibility after this movie?
And yet you question why Larry King wasn't called Larry Sting. Specifically because of this. And he's on trial here because of his stage name.
Both articles visible in this issue of Variety have Lauren Ipsum text.
And yet another example of your hyper-observance not going where it should.
Are we doing everything right, legally?
I'm a florist.
I'll take conversations that should have happened days ago for 600, Alex.
Dude, Jeopardy called. They want their catchphrase back.
You think I don't see what you're doing?
Okay, I'll point out the obvious here and note that Ken is scared of losing his girlfriend to a fucking bee, which is goddamn insane.
He's not exactly the most sane person here, but he's also incredibly sane. Confused? Well, he's insane for thinking he could lose Vanessa to a bee, even though she dumps him later. But he is sane for thinking this whole talking bee stuff is ridiculous. Of course, I don't understand it all myself, and most others probably don't either, but still.
How do you like the smell of flames?
Not as much!
Huh, Ken went from jealous boyfriend to full-on pyromaniac in seconds flat.
Sure, it was quick, but this isn't about Barry trying to steal his partner away. This is because Ken is allergic to bees. Granted, Barry doesn't really have much of a reason to sting him, and tries to talk him out of it, but Ken would generally prefer if Barry wasn't in his partner's home or place of work. Which, yes, is possessive, but if this were reality, Vanessa probably also wouldn't want insects inside.
Barry isn't able to get out of the water and fly away, but he is able to grab a fucking nail file and surf on it. Also, I wonder if he'll tell Vanessa where that file has been.
Remember what I said earlier about bees not being able to fly in rain? Yeah, he can't get out of the water because his wings are soaked. So the only thing he could grab to try and free him from the toilet is the nail file. And yes, he probably would tell Vanessa where it's been.
Wait a minute, this isn't about...
Are you her little bed bug?
Listen, this movie's gone completely off the rails, but the main issue here is that Adam isn't objecting to this line of questioning, and that Judge Oprah is letting this f***ing circus play out in her courtroom.
Adam isn't objecting here because he can't hear Montgomery's questions, despite Barry audibly trying to answer them and mostly freaking out. And what's the judge going to do? She's only there to make sure things run calmly and smoothly and offer the sentences.
Now the movie is claiming that, in addition to being food for the bees, honey is also their blood.
I'm going to have to stop you right there. That is meant to represent an IV bag with a saline solution, not blood. If you're going to send a movie about what rules it sets within its own universe, at least do it right!
Why is Adam in a human hospital? Shouldn't he be back at the Hive, where they have the actual tools to heal him?
He wouldn't have made it back to the Hive after only just losing his stinger, and Barry would have at least wanted him close by so he could come back to the court when he's feeling better.
And, assuming you've done Step 29 correctly, you're ready for the tub.
Judge somehow did not throw Adam in jail for contempt of court 25 steps ago.
My guess is Adam said Barry and Vanessa need more time to gather evidence and get more of a case against the industry together, and this smoking gun was taking way too long to get a hold of.
Living out our lives as honey slaves to the white man!
What?
Hey, he didn't want any part of this, especially after what Barry just said.
The court finds in favor of the bees.
What the f***? But this is a jury trial. Can you just stop a legal proceeding midway through and declare a winner? Is this justice?
Interesting that you cut out the jury chanting "Free the bees" along with the bees sitting behind Barry, Adam and Vanessa. But no, she didn't just end the trial halfway through. Barry revealed his ace up the sleeve, exposed the pitfalls of the honey farming industry, and made a plea to the jury to release the bees, which they obliged.
Wait for my signal. Take him out.
I know Barry won his court case, but because of that, they're letting him command an ATF squad?
Yes, because being a bee, and honey is now under the same controlled substance label as alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, he would have the most say on what should be done with the honey, with the use of the ATF squad. Also, if you were really clever, you'd have noticed that it now says ATFH, since they've added honey to the acronym as well.
B-Movie inadvertently invented fidget spinners.
I doubt this was even a glint in the creator's eye back in 2007.
So is this a normal Ray-style workers' uprising? Or a moral fable about the pursuit of ultimately selfish goals that appear to be for the good of the many? Or is it still about a bee-bro trying to bone a human lady?
It's a bit more of a representation of the idiom, "the grass is always greener on the other side." Barry, not feeling quite so bee-like in his passions away from working, tries to find other outlets and discovers humans packaging and selling honey. When he takes them to trial and wins, he gets the honey back to the bees, but when they get more honey than they can ever imagine to do with, they all stop and everything green in the human world begins to die. Realizing this, Barry has to try and reset the status quo. Also, I'm not letting you get away with that f***ed up comment about Barry and Vanessa, since that particular detail never made it onto the cutting room floor.
Why the hell wouldn't Vanessa talk to Barry about the lack of pollination long before she ran out of flowers? They're still seeing each other, right?
Neither of them realized this would happen. Barry never expected Hunnex to shut down, and Vanessa never expected the Pollen jocks to stop their pollination efforts, leading to the completely dried out landscape of Central Park.
Holy shit, not only did Barry beget this entire urban hellscape, he must have eliminated the entire human population.
Precisely what realm of bull did you pull this from? No one's going to Central Park anymore because everything's dead. And they talk about this later, as since the produce dies out as well, the animal kingdom falls, and then of course the human race. Thankfully no one's developed breathing problems yet, so coughing fits aren't an issue, but that will crop up later.
Looks like we're going to be experiencing a couple of hours delay.
Barry, these are cut flowers with no water. They'll never make it.
Really didn't think I could care about something less than the relationship between these two, but the plot twists at the end of this movie are making a really good case.
Woof! No wonder M. Night Shyamalan hates you.
Train Pilot is one of the only motherfuckers in this movie to freak out over a bee. Haven't we been through this already? Barry's been all over the fucking news.
Sure, but he's a pilot, so he's not home that much due to his job. Also, they're at least 30,000 to 40,000 feet at the air at this point, going from LAX, California to JFK, New York. A bee on a flight like this is not going to be common. And of course he's going to freak out about it. Not to mention, you said one of the only people in this movie to lose his cool over a bee. Did you forget about the people in the car that Barry was sucked into? Ken and the other two house guests at Vanessa's? A man in the street as Vanessa was heading to the supermarket? The shelf stocker that tried to whack Barry with a magazine? Vanessa herself?
Somehow this movie is going to end on an action scene with the flower shop girl who talks to bees landing a plane. And it's like 15th on the list of stupid shit this movie has slung at us.
For crying out loud, can you stop narrating the film for like 2 minutes?
Now attempting to land a plane loaded with people, flowers, and an incapacitated flight crew.
How the f*** did the B News get this information so quickly? Is there a Richard Thornburg up on that plane on a phone leaking details to the press?
Oh, Jeremy, Die Hard called. They want their asshole back.
This works.
This isn't our reality, Jezza. So just get over it and move on.
They chant for Barry to think like a bee, and then he tells Flower Girl to bring the nose of the plane down, but she's not flying the plane. The million bees carrying it are. What the hell's going on?
She's still holding onto the steering wheel, otherwise known as the yoke, which if you press it forwards towards the control panel, will bring the nose of the plane down even if the pollen jocks are still holding it up, which they're mostly doing to stabilize the craft.
Hold on, Barry. Here, you've earned this.
Not only did the pollen jocks remember to bring an extra uniform, it's specifically in Barry's size.
Not entirely. According to Barry, the sleeves needed work. Plus, who's to say they haven't had that waiting in the wings for months after his first flight out, even if it was a failure.
What? What? Where? I didn't... Oh, this is still going on?
Good thing I made a coffee run then, but I think I still arrived too late.
Wait, the bees that surrounded a f***ing plane and were numerous enough to form a target on the tarmac all came from one hive in Central Park? Even Barry referred to the flower on the tarmac as consisting of millions of bees.
Well, yes. I mean, you saw how big the interior of the hive is, and the relative size of the tree. So, you do the math.
That is so not how pollen works. You'd think a movie that wants to have an environmental message would at least take a quick peek at science somewhere along the way.
This is my life from now on. Okay. Once more, Jeremy. This isn't our reality!
Milk, cream, cheese, it's all me. And I don't see a nickel.
So all the animals can talk? And we're just finding this out now? And he's a bee. You're a goddamn cow. How the f*** did you even get out of your pasture to come here?
Another example of a million questions packed into one sin that I can't even focus on correctly.
He's a lawyer too?
Ma'am, I was already a blood-sucking parasite. All I needed was a briefcase.
This movie had 4 screenwriters. Can we squeeze in a joke about a priest, a rabbi, and a preacher into this cliche fest before it's over?
Need I direct you to the sin in the robots video about writers? Because you're going to get hit with a double dose of irony there, Mr. Scott. And with that, court is adjourned. Be sure to leave any more suggestions for CinemaSins sins down below, and I will see you in the next video.